old photos. Oh! Looking through some old albums, finding these old pictures I forgot I even had.
Oh boy, by this time of year we have more projects underway, more things we're doing at once. We're hopefully this week going to finish the roof on the house and be able to get back to being in the shop full time. Carbon fiber landing gear by the dozen now. 2 molds running full time and a 3rd one underway. Carbon fiber layup parts and new mandrels coming for the tune pipes. Our new ring jig, we're making a separate video of making a cardinal ring and a ring jig. Mike working on that every day. And some molding top blocks for guys in the club on a regular basis. And another batch of cardinal kits ready to put together, our winter supply of cardinal kits. And oh boy, this is one of the least fun jobs. And this is where I get stuck working on all day today, making cardinal kits. Going to be working on this later this week. We're going to be trying to get our chandelier up. We want to try to get some quality time in on the I-beamer, but you never know. Every day is an adventure around here. Next thing I want to do is use a smooth blade carbide cutter to get in and just get some of the little extra material out here, especially from around the spar. Small cutter works real nice for doing this operation. Now from this point on, what I did, I'm going to go out and buy an egg crate, one of those egg crate bed pads, but I don't have it here today, of course. And I can't use last year's, it's all full of dope and glue and oil and everything. So what I did, I just made up a temporary thing with a bunch of old towels and sheets, because I don't want to work on the rough glass table. What happens is you're always going to ding up the little rib edges and it's going to make you crazy, and we put so much time into this already. Especially hollowing and sanding out all these little parts. It's really been, this part of it has really been labor intensive. But the next thing I want to do, I want to measure up and fit in. We've already made the bell crank assembly. I want to get that fitted up, installed, and then I can lay out the gear blocks. Last year in the beginning of making all these little component parts, we made up the whole bell crank assembly. So obviously we're ready to just figure out exactly how we want to fit that in there now. By the way, these carbon gear have just been coming out of the mold beautifully. They're really a work of art. And what takes a little more time than normal, when we're building a normal D-tube, C-tube, anything really, we don't have to go through this step now exactly right where we are now. Is I want to figure out when I put the bell crank in, I want to do the gear blocks. What comes first, the chicken or the egg? I want to sheet the little perimeter around the fillets, but I want to make a sequence of things up. I just can't go off like I can when I'm doing a normal D-tube wing. Run off and do them, without even thinking about it. I got to kind of think about each piece as I go. Of course, there's solid carbon fiber in here. We're going to try to attach the bell crank belt so that the push rod, when it's in mid-throw, is right in the center of the fuselage. Not when it's in rest, and not when it's in full deflection, when it's in mid-deflection. And of course we'll use a forward upline on this. Now I'm trying to thread this in real carefully as I go. Just thread it right in through the wing. And since we don't have adjustable lead outs to deal with that at this very scale, very thin tip, I can just thread it right in there very carefully. It slipped right in there. And again, one of the objects in making this model was we wanted to try to make it a lot more scale thinner, more scale wingtips. There's a lot of changes we wanted to make in terms of making it more scale-like. Having a bell crank mounted right on that spar, now I'm going to get the final position and make little tabs. Now, one of the mistakes I've seen I-beam people make is they cut a notch in here. You want to just add a piece to this. Going from side to side, it'll act like a fuselage stiffener also. Or somehow I can make that. I'll make that out of some plywood or some hardwood, maybe a little piece of motor mount material. I want to make sure I have the angle. I left the arrow shaft oversized, that I have the right angle for when we install the horn. Again, a lot of this stuff, when you're building for a whole new way, you have to think through each step of the way. Thinking about doing, I have a piece of this. This is Nomex with carbon fiber on both sides. So I'm going to try to make a little piece that's going to tie in the motor mount, actually be like a little former in here, and tie this all in one piece. So I'll make a pattern up first from balsa wood before I have to cut this, because I only have small pieces of this. Again, I always like to make a little pattern. It's a lot easier to be reshaping and cutting a piece of scrap balsa wood than it is to cut up that piece of Nomex. It's always a good idea if you can connect this bell crank mount right into the I-beam. The I-beam will then be connected to the motor mount crutch. Make a nice precision fit. And we get the bolt position, and of course I'll do the same thing at the bottom. Let's see, right about there. That leaves the little impression for where the bolt has to go, the cutout for the bolt. Now I found another piece of this stuff, believe it or not. So I want to trace this out, and I'll go over to the saw using the back side of a knife blade. This stuff is incredibly strong and incredibly light. Comes from George Spar. What the material looks like before they laminate it between two laminates of carbon fiber. This piece is probably as light or lighter than balsa wood, but there's no way. I know it's 20 times as strong. This stuff can be, when you cut it, can be a little rough on saw blades. It's always a good idea to use a thin tooth saw blade. Making mirror images off the pattern, what I've been able to do is make sure that when I grind them together and I run the drill through together, that they're exactly the same. That'll ensure that we have the bell crank, the post relatively straight up and down. I make two mirror images of something. What's really handy to do the fine truing up, put a precision drill down through the hole, and grind them both at the same time, or sand them, or whatever. Now we know that that post relative to the spar will be at a completely 90 degrees. And then when I'm all done, I can just pull the pieces apart, and these are pretty much ready to install. Okay, I'm just tacking these pieces in, the slightest little tack, so I can get everything lined up before I put the final glue joint in there. That is nice material to work with, by the way. Available from George Spar. The bottom piece, I can trim this to go right up on top so that it'll be a spar reinforcement. But I had two choices. I wanted to put it on the back. I really don't have to. It's going to make it lower than it has to be. So I'll brace it on top. It'll give a little more beef and reinforce the fuselage side at exactly the same time. You can kind of get a former to do two jobs at once. Laying this out on top of the spar, one of the things I realized I was going to have a problem with possibly is with the pipe tunnel, and I wanted to leave this as hollow as possible. I don't want to have it run in here. In fact, on Strega we had a problem always, but we had them have special headers made and everything. This is one of the problems I'd like to circumvent, is try to get this as low as possible. Obviously when I'm all done, I'll trim off the bolt and put a little cap there. But now that I have the bell crank is still loose in here, I can slide that up and down until I get it exactly in the middle. Get an idea, I can slide that up and down, tack it in position first, of course, and make sure I have clearance all around. What's nice, this whole area by the bell crank is relatively hollow at this time. The crank is centered right down the center of the ring. We've got the rod throw exactly where we want it. Everything is tacked in here now. Now I can put permanent glue joints on everything and just let it kick off by itself for a few minutes. Really did work out as good as I could ever have expected. I've got the full travel, nothing running into it, plenty of clearance around the push rod. And I can just make this a permanent installation. The thing we wanted to accomplish is when we're doing a pull test, we want to be able to put our hands right here where the outside fillet will be. We don't want to have any stress on the ring at all during the pull test or actually doing the flying. And this will work out. This is where I'm happy the way that worked out engineering-wise. That really did work out. We'll put a nice thick bead of glue around the edge on both sides, glue it to the spar, and let it kick. All good glue joints on here now. Now I can trim this bottom piece off, and that'll give me the maximum trough here for the airflow through the pipe tunnel. This worked out pretty well. I'm kind of happy with this. The easiest way to do this, of course, is with a parting wheel. You always see if you can do it without breaking too many of them. As I said, we never break one. That was down to the last little bit. Being a cheapo, I didn't want to throw it away. See, one of the lessons we learned from the Strega, the time that we worked on Strega, was that to always keep as much air and as much room here as possible. Don't build up anything you don't need in the middle of this, where that pipe is going to run through. And an I-beam allows the pipe to drop down, even an extra 1/4 of an inch down into the fuselage. And even if you didn't need this room, it's good to have the airflow going through. Parting wheels, I don't know if I mentioned this. I have some parting wheels. You can see how much thicker they are. Well, there's definitely some good uses for these, but when you're trying to cut a piece of wire, it seems like the thin ones cut just a little bit better. And of course, when you use up that last little nub, you know you're always going to break it anyway, but these are real handy to have for making a nice clean cut on the wire. Want to get that sharp edge out of there. I want to do the same thing. I want to leave a little bit of that exposed, and I want to get inside with some CA and glue the bolt right to the spar, so there's no tendency for this to want to walk up and down. I can see you're impressed I didn't even break the blade. Make sure the controls are exactly in neutral. I want to trim what amounts to be the excess of this arrow shaft, just so it's not in our way. Because of where it is, I have to take an odd angle slice and then I can trim it off even. Now I can trim. I'm going to make sure this is perfectly smooth. And I'll get some PJ1 on here, a couple drops just to get it started. Like motorcycle chain oil. as the lubricant of choice because it goes on like foam. The carrier evaporates and it turns into wheel bearing grease, turns into a real high lubricating quality grease. And if you knew the stress that was on a motorcycle chain, on a 110, 150 horsepower motorcycle, one of these big super bikes, this stuff does a great job. It goes on like foam, you just let it sit there and evaporate. Once it all evaporates, you can wipe the excess off. And what I do is I try to get a little lubrication on this 3 or 4 different times. Each time it'll kind of evaporate off. You buy this any place they sell motorcycle parts. It also has some great rust inhibitors in it, so once a good thing is any of the exposed wire, just put a thin coat over it. Keeps it from rusting as years go by. I'm assuming anybody that's interested really in making quality models is going to be looking for the long haul here. Planes that'll last 8, 10, maybe more years. Now I want to wrap the lead outs right away. The reason is every time I walk around the shop I catch things. So what I want to do is cut up 2 little pieces of, this is the size under 1/8, 3/32 tubing, 2 little slices, get the lead outs bent and soldered and defluxed. Easy way to cut this tubing with a nice neat cut. In fact, what I'll do is I'll line it up with one of these other lines, is just roll it, take a brand new XL blade, and just roll it. And I want to deburr these before I do anything. Just get the tip of the blade in there and get it deburred. Make like a little bit of a funnel on there. Because this is a really nice tight fit. And again, I only use 032 music wire. No substitutes. Just spend a minute or so to deburr the tube. Clean off any oxidation. All we ever use in the shop is Stay Bright silver solder. Stay Bright, no substitutes. I wrapped and soldered the lead outs. We've done this on video so many times it's pointless to even repeat it, but I always like to have that extra material here. I have seen planes that have worn that wire out in time. And again, we're looking for the long haul. I'm going to take a little Gorms and polish these up, of course. Get a nice finish on them. That keeps the dope from sticking to it when we go to do the paint finish. A little detail like the lead outs being polished. The little ends, I know all these things. They seem meaningless. They seem like, wow, that's overkill. Well, you know what? You put your plane down in the front row at the Nats, and you line them up and you try to find what's different, what's better, what's worse. And a lot of times all these little details, sliding canopies, exhausts, landing gear doors, it's all these little details that add up to being the top dog. So this is one of them. All these planes that I make always have these polished up nicely. Push rod's hitting the side of the body. And you can see now with a 4-inch bell crank, you can see how much throw you're going to have. You're not going to have, you know, these guys that have a plane like a Rich Jacobone's plane, you go like that and it's done. Now, the next thing I wanted to do, and I don't have a lot of time left today, I wanted to sheet this first 2 ribs from rib 1 to 2. So obviously what I need to do is back cut it and lay out the sheeting here because I need a place to make the fillet. And I had a couple of ideas here that I wanted to try. I noticed that I'm doing the bottom first. What I'm going to do is the first thing is back cut this rib and then try to transpose it out onto this rib so I can lay that sheeting, and I'll probably wind up using 16th if I can find some decent wood. Lay it right in there. Again, I'm doing the bottom first so I can see if I like the way it lays out, and I want it to add some rigidity to the body. Funny, this kind of a design is kind of like it's all hollow and open inside. So I want to build the strength, again, around the outside as much as I can. I was a little hesitant to just add an extra couple of ribs there and build a fillet. It'll also give me some room to hook the silk span on when I actually get to do the tissuing. Now what I'm trying to do, trying to get a gauge on just how much of this I need to take off. Now it looks like I have a fairly parallel line here. So it means I should be able to take a relatively even strip off. You will find out once this is done. The only problem is this stuff is so delicate at this point in time, you really have to be careful. What I think I'll do is I'll do this up with, see if I can find a real piece of relatively hard sheeting, not real soft. And of course I'll use 3/32. That'll give me a little extra wood to blend into. This is just going to be, that's why I'm doing the bottom first. Anytime you're in doubt of how you want to do it. Now that whole length I should be roughly 3/32 under. A little bit more out in the front and this should be fine. It's just a question of fitting in the next 3 or 4 pieces and getting some reasonably nice joints there. It really does make the body very rigid there. It adds a lot of strength. Now the whole trick here is to make sure that we're at the same level. So I'm taking that little ruler, little machinist ruler, and as we go down, just making sure that I haven't gained or lost anything across the whole airflow. Now what's nice is we can run a extra glue seam down inside there. Boy, that's nice. Got both sides of the bottom done, ready to flip it over. Maybe I can even finish up the top tonight before it's time to pack it in here. Next step, I want to sand this, at least get a smooth sanding on it. Got a nice glue seam from inside and from outside. Now, whenever I do this, I try to make up a special little block and be very, very careful. I don't want to make any valleys or bows in it. I really want to just very carefully sand that out because I want this, where the tissue transitions in, to be a perfect transition in there. There's a sanding, the sticky back sandpaper on kind of a ringmaster-like leading edge, and the trick is to just very gently just kiss this off. Of course, this is all soft punk wood. It really sands really quickly. And we're going to fill this all in up on the fuse with, obviously with a fillet of some kind, probably an air epoxy fillet, but and really this is the transition that I want to have. Where's that little ruler? I want to make sure I have this transition. Real accurate, real good. I also want to harden up this wood joint here at the same time. Not just doing the top will just be redundant, do that off camera, and that'll probably be all I can get done tonight. That worked out real well. I guess you can tell I'm satisfied the way this is coming out. Not many times I get this lathered up about it, but that's really working out well. And what it's going to do, it lets the motor clutch go right into a very rigid part of the fuselage that'll transfer vibration and torque right back. All those pieces are on now. One of the things I wanted to do, now years ago I used to do this to the original sweeper. I think it's even in the article, I'm not sure, the original I-beamer. But one of the things I always like to do is at this point in time, because I'm going to do a lot of rib truing in the near future and a lot of sanding before I actually cut it. I'm going to radius all the cap strips. One of the things I really wanted to do, I want to take it outside into the garage. It's dark already, and it's freezing out there. And I want to mix up a batch. Since this plane is going to be a Brodak dope test plane, I want to mix up a coat of 50-50 Brodak thinner, Brodak dope, and get one coat, maybe even two coats on all of the structural parts of the ribs. Not so much on the leading and trailing edges and edges, because we're going to sand all the edges, but onto the wood itself. And what that does, it accomplishes two things. It's an old-timer's trick. It keeps the moisture from swelling the wood, and these things are down in a damp basement all the time. So a wing like this that's very delicate at this point, and it looks like it's still pretty true, but it's still very delicate until you get it covered. There's very little strength in an I-beam wing. It's a monocoque, and you get all of the strength from the covering. So let me mix that up and get outside and get a coat on here before we freeze to death. See how much I've got even carved away from that leading edge as I've radiused this whole front. I've roughed it out. Again, this is all going to be covered with a fillet, but I want to rough it out, get thin CA in there to get as tight of a joint. Because in essence, the whole inside of the plane is hollow. And this really does add a lot of rigidity, having that piece in there with the grain going sideways. It's been a lot of fun engineering up all these parts, and with Bob Martenz's help, Joe Adamusco's help. It doesn't really look it at this point in time, but an awful lot of engineering went into laying out these parts so that they fit and so that they duplicate or come close to duplicating the performance we hope they're going to be able to get of the original Spitfire and Seafire. But this will be a Brodak dope test plane. The idea out here is, obviously one of the things we're not able to do anymore with parents' asthma and allergies, and we do all our painting or as much as we can. Sometimes I sneak around when she's not home. But again, I mixed this up 50-50. This will be the Brodak dope test plane. And I really want to know if I'm going to run into a problem that I haven't anticipated. Well, it's better that I should run into it myself. Frank McMillan is already doing some test work, and so far, I'm sure if he did have a problem, he would have already let me know about it. And obviously, if I have a problem, I'll try to pass that information on to him. Now, I'm just doing the rib sides. This is really an old trick. I don't even think people do this anymore. I know free flight people, a lot of them tend to do this. And the old purpose of it is, it seals the wood from getting moisture content in it, and it's moving and shrinking and not shrinking. It adds almost no weight, and it gives the wing itself now. You still have to put the gear blocks in. I got to make up the horn. And what I'll do tonight, before I go to sleep, is I'll make a little list of what I still have to do. What are the things I still have to do here? so I can kind of set up a little priority schedule. Anyway, if you just get a little look at...
Okay, that puppy can sit out here all night, freezing. Actually, it's good when it's cold like this. The dope will take longer to dry. It'll get a better penetration. One coat is all we need. We're going to get inside and sit by the fireplace. It's cold.
Because we're using this whole plane is going to be a Brodak dope test plane. This is the little rudder that we covered, and I was doing a little shrink test on it. It basically looks perfect. But one of my theories is, now what I'm going to try to do is get that wing covered. I need to do gear blocks, the horn, like I said, maybe another day or two of work on it. But then I want to cover the wing and get the dope shrinking up. Now the reason for that is pretty easy, is it's hard with Karen with her problems. It's very difficult for her to take the smell of dope. So what I can do is, while I'm working on other parts of the model, flaps, tail and everything, all this, just like this part, can be out there shrinking and drying and pretty much, getting ready for the final finish. Now I have some Brodak primer, I have Rejuvenate, I have all kind of things I want to implement into this test program. But the biggest one so far is, we were worried that the shrink ratio wouldn't be right. It looks pretty good to me.
Drying up in the garage. We're ready to pick this up tomorrow.
Now in today's mail, I got this award from the AMA. I was unable to attend their banquet, needless to say, but as a nominee for the Hall of Fame, the people that didn't make the Hall of Fame, and obviously there's a lot of them, I think there's 70 or 80, get this nice award, the Pioneers Award. Now, there's only one thing funny on here. They have here for 50 years of service, and I've only been in the hobby 47, so I think somebody lied on my resume here. I don't know, but it is a nice award, and I'm obviously very honored by it. The Pioneers Award. Boy, I tell you, one thing I would go for is having a new body. I wish I wasn't a pioneer, but I was a young man again. Anyway, it really is a nice award. Very grateful to get it, and thanks to all the people at the AMA that made the decision. We always do the first part of every day. We load up all the molds, make the gear production for the day, and in our case, we're waiting on having a third mold here. We're going to have a third mold by the end of the week. We've also gotten some now this is from the company that George was using their molding rubber. I'm really excited about this for laying up our tune pipe. The mandrels are back. Jimmy's working on the mandrels again. I'm real excited about using this. George was having extremely good luck using this. Is Smooth Sill molding rubber. Now these are the people that have the molding class. It's $300 to go to a weekend class, and that may be one of the choices. Maybe a Santa Claus will give me a gift certificate to go this year. I don't know. It's in February. Anyway, this is one of the things I'd really like to learn more about. Now, from this point in construction on, I guess you can see what I've done. I've taken one of these bed pads they're about $10, and this is an old greasy one I had laying in the garage. I gave Mike some for his little table he set up out there. Anyway, what that does, it protects from catching the ribs, and that coat of dope that we put on the other night, boy, that firmed everything up nice. Stiffens it up, adds almost no weight at all, and because it's just going to keep it a little bit sealed from moisture too, as a side benefit. We did a little test here with the PVA. This is a material, this is Delrin, and we're going to be making some tooling out of Delrin and some tooling out of Corian. Two materials I wanted to see if they were epoxy proofed, in other words, if the epoxy would stick. Well, the epoxy kind of stuck, kind of didn't. I was able to just peel that off. But down here with the PVA, and obviously this is one of the things you need to find out, if you're going to make a mold out of this material, I want to really just push it up against the wall here, just to see if it's going to stick to the PVA, in which case we're in good shape. The PVA acts as a mold release agent, and that'll allow us to do even nicer tune pipe molding when it comes time to run up the mandrels. Now, Jimmy worked on the mandrels today, and he wanted me to do this little test. Maybe you can make little poker chips out of these. So I used some of the extra resin from laying up the gear just to see It looks like this material, and this is Delrin, it looks like we're going to be able to mold right off of Delrin. Even if we do need some PVA, it won't be a problem. So that was a good little test, and that's a good way to test molding material. Do a little test, lay up your resin on it, and of course, assuming you have enough draft angle, that should mean you should be able to get the part off without a problem. Good little test.
What I want to do tonight, I have a little bit of time here. I want to chalk up the ribs, and by chalking them up, this is really old technology. This is the oldest technology I know. Just using a piece of kids' chalk, lay up all the ribs in any color. And by the way, chalk does have an age. We found that out when we were making Mike's wing, that we were trying to use up some old chalk and forget about it. So what I want to do is I want to chalk up a whole wing family. Now I have a really trick idea, or something I'm going to try on this wing. I'm going to try using Brodak's primer as a way of making the ribs have a nice rounded cap strip edge. Again, I don't know if it's going to work, so what I probably will do is do one of the bottom panels first and see if that's going to work. Again, this is one of the things you want to take. This is going to be very, very time consuming now. I don't want to start this on a time that I have to be done in an hour or so. And we got these very, very scale, very thin tips. Very delicate at this point. Any I-beam plane at this point in time is just like an egg. And once you get the covering on there, it becomes amazingly strong. It's just a question of is when you sand and get all of that off, you know you have a flat surface. And I use 2 or 3 ribs at a time. There's no way you can use a real flat block. If you had say a Nobler wing or a Cardinal wing, you could use a flat block. But as soon as you get off all the chalk, you know you've got a pretty good chance of having a blend. Again, you don't want to do this on a night that you're trying to rush and get through. Very time consuming, but the ultimate thing is that we should have all the ribs when we actually come down to putting the covering on. You won't have one sticking up or one low one. Also, you can pick up any of the high spots. I already see a high spot right there. As soon as you have all the chalk sanded off, you know you have a pretty good shot at having it.
This is where the chalk really works its weight in gold. It's worth its weight. As you can see, these little spots come through, little spots that need to be addressed, or more sanding. And obviously we're going to radius everything off, but to get everyone that it's exactly even with the fillet. This is a very, very complex shape, very time consuming. If you have a straight line wing plate, an Impact, an SV, a Cardinal, this is not that labor intensive. But in this case, I mean, it could be that I'll have this plane for 10 or 15 years, or maybe until I die, who knows. And I really do want to have this as nice, as true as possible. So now I've got one wing done, and that basically was a good chunk of time. I'll just repeat the same thing on the outboard, on the inboard wing. See, I'm really getting tired already. And I'll see if I can get all 4 of these panels squared away tonight, because then I can go into the next step. And I have a little priority list. I remade my priority list. I need to still do the gear blocks, and I still need to do the flap one, and I need to figure out exactly what I'm going to do back there. But this is just time consuming, and we better get on it. One of the things I came up with in the last couple of days, I used to use the wing of the I-beam Spitfire to
to lay out my carbon toe. And this stuff can really get nasty if it gets all snarled up. And what I had a piece of the material left over that we made Mike's wing jig with. And what I'm going to do, and we tried this yesterday, this worked out so well that I have to load up, again, every morning now in the shop. The carbon fiber gear have become so popular, I really didn't anticipate how popular it was going to become, that what I've had to do is keep the molds going constantly. So what I do is when I have some free time, and this is really a time management thing, anytime I have some free time or I'm on the phone long distance, what I do is go get a couple of packs of toe and just get all the toe cut. And believe it or not, it takes quite a bit of time to cut the toe as part of the layup. So what this little fixture allows me to do, and it's kind of a neat little invention, is get all the toe lined up. Then when I go to lay up a mold, and we have 2 molds running every morning and every night now to keep up with production, what I have is I have all the toe cut. So I'm 8, 10, 15 minutes ahead every time I do a layup. So having a little tool like this, and obviously it's a piece of this wood that was left over from when we made the wing jig, and also just some scrap 1/4-inch balsa. No money at all, 10 minutes of time. And the way I laid out these sticks is I just put a stick in between, glued the next one, put a stick in between. So they're all nice and parallel and straight like an I-beam wing. And because we're working on this Spitfire pretty much every day now, I like to get this part of the day's job done. It's even early in the morning or late at night. Get this part done, and it frees me up to have more time to work on the plane. Anytime I can save 8, 10 minutes a day, what that means in a week, that might be an extra hour. In a month, 4 or 5 hours. And when it comes time to actually finish it in the plane, I'll either have the plane done earlier or I'll have extra hours to put into some of the finer detailing of the plane. So either way, this is a nice thing if you're going to do any of your own carbon fiber work. A nice little tool to have, no money and very little time to make it.
Even though our molds, we PVA them. As soon as I get up in the morning, I'll come down to the shop, PVA the mold. It needs 4 coats per mold. I'm sure there's ways I could use less, but then you get into high risk. I've also been able to, little imperfections like this, now I've been laying these up, little imperfections like this, the resin that's left over from the previous mold, I can just fill that in, lay a piece of Mylar back on top of it. That's been a good way to patch them. The wide mold, I've made a couple of changes. I've ground out some of the extra wood so that the gear in itself is a little bit thinner, and I've got these, even though these are a larger size, these are under an ounce now too. So we're making progress. When you do small production runs like this, you can constantly upgrade the product. If we were to mold this in titanium or something, you'd never be able to update it. You'd not want to update it. Anyway, and Jimmy is working on a 3rd mold made out of Corian that's even going to be thinner and I think a little nicer finished than this. So as this product gets to be developed, it'll be constantly improving, and obviously we're trying to do the best we can to make the best possible product. This is the header that was on the 91 Cardinal, and Mike Kajeski is going to use this on his Cardinal, the one we're building the wing for right now. Of course, we'll probably have a little bit nicer finish than I had, and we'll definitely have carbon gear on the plane, that's for sure. What a nice job he used polishing this up. And this is a good trick, by the way. Anybody has never polished aluminum, you can buy this 3M pad. It comes in medium and fine and rough, but the ultra fine is the one, look at this one, is self-destruct. Ultra fine is the one that really polishes aluminum to the point of it's embarrassing how nice of a finish you can get on there. And one of the things I do, anytime I take an engine out of a plane, any little residual oil that's on it, you just get it right off. Very neat and clean way to do it. I've also made up my little list of my priority list of what I want to get done in the next couple of days, but again, we're always limited by the amount of time we have to spend in the shop on other projects, and right now we need to lay up some more landing gear. That's going to consume most of the day. Show this up there. Another thing I always hear from people, oh gee, you have so much time to build. Well, you know what, there's a reality to this. I have to tell you, it kind of aggravates me when people say that, because then I find out, well, they work from 9 to 5, come home and sit and watch TV for 6 hours and never get anything done. Yeah, I get up and usually get an hour or two of building in the morning before Karen even wakes up, and then sometimes when she's in bed and she falls asleep, or she falls asleep on a couch, I'll come down and work a couple more hours. You got to force yourself if you want to.
If you really want to get this amount of stuff built, and the amount of stuff we do in the shop, it just takes an extra little bit of effort. Is anytime you can get ahead on one, if I can save 10 minutes on this, 10 minutes, eventually I'm going to find enough time that I'll have an hour or two extra to work on my project, so it helps. Tonight I want to lay out the gear blocks. Now in the D-tube ring, of course, the blocks are a little different. They're a lot different. And what I did on the original Spitfire, the original one we made, that Joe and I made, the blocks were a little further apart. I tried to make it more scale-like on the Seafire than on the Spitfire. But again, all of this is a compromise, and what I'm going to do is lay out possibly two different locations. I know I don't want to have them that close together. I'd like to have them a little wider, and this looks a little bit too wide. It really gets unscaled, so I'll probably come up with a compromise position right in between the two as the final separation on the gear. The first thing I did is just basically cut up a few pieces of 1/8" light ply, and now what I want to do is get the wire and lay out a trough for the wire. This is the way I've always made up my gear blocks in the past, and it's worked very well, so I don't want to improvise here too much. It's only going to be the method of attachment that I use, and I want to see how I can reinforce this. I got to kind of invent this as I go along. I get a piece of scrap wire here and just get a rough idea where it's going to be. I don't need to even mark it. And I'm going to get some 1/8" balsa going end grain. It's 1/8" balsa end grain. You really don't need to use plywood here. This is one area you can save a 1/2 ounce, 3/4 of an ounce just by not over-engineering the blocks themselves. The blocks themselves, there's no strain. When a plane lands correctly, there's a torsional load on this and an up and down load. But there's really, other than that, there's not a lot of loading going on side to side on the wire. I've never worn out a plane that had 1/8" balsa sides here. So to make this whole block out of a piece of hardwood seems like a needless adding of an ounce to the plane. Now if we just strip off a few pieces here, none of this has to be accurate at this point in time. But this is a real good way. In fact, if you've seen the video that shows when we lost Tsunami, we tried to break the gear out of the wing, and I mean the wire broke. So I don't think we need to over-engineer that any more than we have already. I make a couple extra pieces because I want to get a real nice fit on this. And again, these pieces don't need to be real accurate yet. I just like to strip them off. Get one edge nice and clean with a block sander or a run belt sander. Only need to clean up one edge here. Boy, if you remember the old days when everybody that had a wing-mounted gear used to have heart attacks every time they'd land in the grass. Now we've landed the planes that we've done this way season after season with less than world champion pilots piloting them in way too fast, way too slow, dropping them in, including myself. So I really have a lot of confidence in this method of making up gear blocks. They're two-piece. It's a little extra work. At this point in time, it takes about an extra half an hour to engineer this up. But once you're done, bulletproof. Now you can use this piece is already tack glued in place. You can use the wire itself to make that a nice tight trough around the wire. And again, the only reason this works is because this is end grain and we'll harden that whole trough up with some thin CA. I've got a perfect trough on it. I want to seal it up, hardened up with some thin CA. You notice I'm making the blocks oversized. I'm only going to use 2 inches, a little bit more than 2 inches of material because I want the torsion arm to be a little less than 2 inches. What I've found out is if you make the torsion arm 1 inch, the gear gets so stiff that it's difficult to get a nice landing. Anything bigger than 2 inches, you get a long torsion on the gear. Is always you're going to start the engine and the nose is bouncing up and down like a trampoline. So I've kind of settled in on just a little under 2 inches on the torsion arm. So just by making up the gear oversized, when I'm done, I can slice off the part that I need. Obviously, I got to make 2 parts for this, for each side.
to keep track of this dimension here. Make sure the wire is sitting perfectly flush, because your blocks are going to drop onto this. And if they're being held up by the wire, it's a problem. So I want to make sure I have exactly the right dimension. If it was a little on the thin side, obviously what I could do is put a little plywood on there. If it was a little too high, I can block sand this down until I get a nice smooth edge. And to get those nice tight block fits, that's one of the important steps. Just went over to the airplane, the airframe, measured off 3 ribs. A rib in the center, and left a little bit sticking out on each side. So I will have covered 2 complete rib stations and 3 ribs. After you glue all the edges, and I go around the complete perimeter to get a good soaking on the end grain, sometimes the wire can tighten up to the point where it might be difficult to get in and out. You want to have a nice tight fit before you even consider going to the next step. I want to use this cutter to cut the notches for the gear wire to drop down into the wing. Now, one of the things, if you do this step by step, the way I'm showing, I'm going to carve this notch, I'm going to set the blind nuts, and I'm going to go through a sequence of things. If you use exactly that sequence, this is a relatively straightforward thing. Leave one step out. As an example, if you mount this in the wing, drill the holes in, and don't make the hatches at the same time, you wind up with a nightmare. You can never get the boxes all lined up and everything. It can make you crazy. To get those nice, neat fits and those nice, neat edges and angles and everything, when this is all done and it looks totally pro, you really have to do this, and Joe and I have come up with this system, doing it over and over and over, that you get a perfect edge on the box every time, but go step by step is very important. Now, again, the first step is I need to cut the notch for the wire that can drop down into the wing. The single most important part of mounting bulletproof gear blocks is the part of the wire that goes into the wing needs to almost come out the other side. If that wire, if you end it right up here, you have so much leverage, it's going to break that block or break the block out of the gear. The whole trick of this is to get that wire to go all the way down almost to the other side of the wing. And that is real bulletproof engineering. It works every time. Now you also, obviously the wire is not at a complete 90 degrees. You need to carefully get an angle in it, a little radius. As I said, you need a real nice radius, because that wire doesn't go out and drop down. It's going to have a little bit of a radius in it. You don't want to have sharp pointed bends on any music wire. So again, I'll do the other one, then we'll be ready to start making up the blocks. But to do it in this sequence where you make the blocks, the hatches, the screws, the bolt, everything is done before you slip this into the wing. This part, anyway. May seem like a little bit of overkill here, but believe me, it isn't. I'm taking 64th plywood, and I want to line up, I want to make a couple of just rough hatches. They can be a little bit oversized. I don't need to make them because I'm going to do the final grinding. See, what's going to happen, I'm going to drill this piece and the hatch at the same time. Put screws in and then use the belt sander to grind it even. If you try to hold the pieces even, drill the holes, any combination other than that, it gets one piece. See, in all engineering, one piece should line up the other piece. You should have the cowling line up the cuts on the fuselage. There should always be something lining something up. When you're just working in midair, it's difficult. So what I want to do, and this is, well, not the greatest well-kept secret in the world, and if you take 64th plywood and you just start laminating it with the grain in opposite directions, the reason I wouldn't want to use 1/8" plywood, it's going to be heavy. 16th plywood is not going to be strong enough. But if I take 2 or 3 laminates, 2 of these is usually enough. And I do one with the grain going that way, one with the grain. I can even cross-laminate them, but just putting the grain in a different direction. It's such a good trick. It comes out being such a strong part when you're done. And I need to make these pieces as thin as possible. I don't want to have them, an inch thick. As thin as possible here. Just cross-grain. 3 laminates of 64th plywood with grain going in different directions is a very, very strong material. Oh, all you need need to do is just cut the pieces out oversized. You don't have to be fancy about it at all. Line these up with the grain going opposite. My God, it is so strong when you get to this point. Nice and strong. And I'll obviously make the other one up at this time too. Just make them plenty oversized that your block can fit right on top of there while you do the drilling. The next step is I need to lay one piece on top of the other. And it doesn't matter exactly how I do it, as long as I have plenty of clearance around both edges. And what I want to do, I want to mark out, it's a lot easier to do it this way, I want to offset the two screws. So you might think putting the two screws in a line is a good idea. Now you put a stress riser in. So it's a little bit easier if I kind of lay it out this way. One on each end, maybe in equal parts toward each end. Now, what I want to do is I want to drill on a drill press, complete 90 degrees, of course. I want to drill down through here the size of a 440 bolt. If you're going to make this system work, it's real important to keep the hole an accurate size, because the hole is going to line the block up in this little pocket that we're going to ultimately make. And the whole idea of this is to do the drilling of both parts at the same time. That's the whole key to getting this to work right. Drill it's exactly the dimension of the blind nuts, so I don't wind up with a sloppy fit there, and I keep as much of the meat of the wood intact. When this is all done right, it's really, first time I saw it, Joe did this the first time I looked at it, wow, it's a thing of beauty looking at it. The blocks just drop right in. That should be a precision hole that exactly fits the blind nut nice and tight. We're using up aluminum screws. These are aluminum 440 socket screws. First thing I want to do is go get a little bit of that motorcycle chain lube, put it on the threads, and that'll keep any tendency for the CA to get in there and lock up the bolt in the nut socket once this is assembled. Good little tip anytime you're doing blind nuts, before you even insert a blind nut, before you even think about it, go get a little bit of WD-40, run it through there a few times, and you put a nice little insurance policy that these are not going to freeze up on you from a drop of CA getting in there when you install it in a plane. By the way, you might want to get some, from Micro Fasteners. There's all aluminum hardware, aluminum nuts, aluminum washers. Flemington, New Jersey, 110 Hillcrest Road, 08822. And when you call up or ask for John. John is a real, very knowledgeable guy. He'll go out of his way to help you out. Micro Fasteners. Just that little bit of WD-40 will save you so much aggravation. There's so many times, oops, I'm getting the thing all right. So many times I've put a blind nut in, and one drop of CA gets in there, and you got to go back and pretty much do a repair. But that's a great trick. Always use WD-40 or chain lube. And the other trick is we want to have a nice, I want to look at where the little sprues for the blind nut, I don't want them hanging off. I want them all to be touching the root if possible. You can see what a nice press fit that is. That's just one of the things. Having a little set of precision drills so that these holes, see so many people, they drill motor mount holes or they make a crutch. And what happens, and everything is like sloppy, like an old cow that's been run around a bull ring a few times here. And look, that's a nice press fit. One drop of CA on there, hold that in forever. I also have these neat little aluminum washers. And when I get these, of course this is going to have a balsa cap. I can't even pick these up. A balsa cap, but these are aluminum. They're a precision fit to a 440 screw. They're like a fender washer. And that makes for, now when we have the balsa hatch on here, of course, you won't see the washer, but you'll have a nice little footprint. If we didn't have the washer, it would tend to, after, X amount of tightenings, it would just squash down into that wood. But this tightened down, a little drop of CA here, of course, we have the WD, so it's not going to lock up on the nut itself. Now what I can do is go over to the bench grinder and grind even to this plate. So in effect, this part is going to make that part. I'm almost like I'm making the two parts at once. And hopefully, when we do the final trim around this with balsa wood and the little cap, everything will line up. That'll reference off the hatch and the block being exactly the same size and having the blind nut in exactly the right spot. Now, anybody's ever made a cowling, put the cowling on and try to drill a hole in the cowling, take it off and drill a hole in the airplane, forget it. You put the cowling on and it's crooked. If you get the cowling on and you have, just as an example, or the tip weight box or the whatever, in place and drill both of them where one lines up the other one, you're so far ahead of the game, and it's such a good little way to do it. I put my gear spacing exactly in the middle of the Spitfire and the Seafire, so it'll be the best compromise I can come up with. Now the three ribs this is going to extend across, of course I want to have it tied right into the spar, but before I do that I want to build my box. I want to put the pieces in the leading edge, I want to put the pieces on this side, and the reason for that is I don't want to have, as soon as I cut away this rib, this whole thing is going to fall out of alignment. I want to keep the integrity and then cut out the box. I stripped off a nice piece of 1/4 inch. This is actually going to be the outline of the box. And I could have possibly gone with a little bit thinner wood 1/8 inch, but I think the 1/4 inch will tend not to let a wrinkle go right behind here. And in the front, of course, it'll add a little rigidity. Also want to cut the pieces just a little bit oversized. It's not a press fit. Like anything, if you spend the time building some integrity in right here, you don't need to add that extra ounce of epoxy and that extra ounce that always seems to make the plane fly like a lead sled. Picture if you did this another way and you just cut these two pieces out and then try to float the block in. I think that'll just be a lot of extra work, so I'm hoping. Remember, this is the first time we've gone through this little maze of engineer it out as you go along problems. I want to get a tight fit. And if anything, I'll just tack that in there for now. I don't even need to glue it. I can almost get the shape without gluing it. Tight fits now, not just big blobs of glue. Just tack this in position for now, in case I need to rip it out for some reason. Now I need to just lay this out. I'm just really concerned with the fact right here, the tissue would be pulling and I might get a wrinkle here in time. It's a cheap little insurance policy. Now by insetting this in, this is not even tacked in yet. I can get a mark on where I want that block, and then I can just tack glue these in position, get them lined up nice. On the saw, and I'll be ready to inset the block. You just use the edge of the block to set that in.
Make sure you have enough material sticking up. Takes a little time to do it this way, but I think you get just a much nicer job.
Now ultimately we'll use a little bit of chalk on here to set this. I just want to make sure I have enough material sticking up so I can get a nice blend on this.
I want to get a nice clean fit, of course, in here. There might be a little quicker way of doing this, but this way I know is going to get me the fits that I'm looking for. I can't even push that. Oh, there it is. Okay. I want everything to be a press fit. And I want this plywood completely up against the carbon fiber. Need to grind it just a little bit more. Here's where a little bit of patience really pays off.
Now obviously I'm going to get in there with some CA, maybe a little carbon fiber reinforcement, something to reinforce this as much as I possibly can. And the next thing is I have to make up this little block that's going to go up here, and I'm going to make that out of 3 pieces of light ply. I want to have plenty of meat so that wire doesn't start wearing a hole in that wood. I've tried in the past making them with very thin wood, and the wire from being hit back and forth opens up that hole. So I'm going to not fool around. I made 3 pieces of 1/8" light ply, and I want to get this fit in here now and then figure out exactly where that wire is going to come through it. Piece temporarily in there, what I can do is I can use this to line up and get exactly my mark. I'll flip it over, mark it, and drill a hole, but I'm going to try to cap it off so even in the worst of all worlds, it doesn't come out the other end and into the tissued ring. If for some reason that wire got pushed in a little too far, this would tend to keep it from coming out the top. And it's the separation between those blocks that builds strength.
Now again, I can make a little test piece of wire here. And I can mark exactly where that is. Again, the thing I'm looking for here always, press fits. Tight fits where there's very little space between the joints. And I have that marked. In fact, I can finish the circle.
I can chamfer this with one of my grinders. And the purpose of that is when the wire comes through the ring, it'll kind of self-center and get into alignment. If you have a perfect hole and that thing is out by even 1 degree, you're just going to be beating it to death trying to install it all the time. Now the other side, I'm going to make a little 1/64 plywood cap on that so that inadvertently a wire just can't slip through and come out the other side. That little chamfer is a big help.
Also, I want to get a little thin CA down in that little recess and then make sure that, obviously one of the things I want to prevent is that I get some glue or some dope or something and then the wire doesn't want to go back in. And I put a little cap on the other side, just to keep the wire from coming through. Now the real test is when you can take a piece of wire, drop it right into that little socket down at the other end, nice.
Okay, now before I go any further, I want to do, in fact we're running out of time here really today because I've been spending so much time laying this out. I want to replicate the same thing on the other side. Maybe even get a little time to make the little blocks tonight too, but
Getting this much done in one session, this gets one more thing off the list of things I have to do before I can go on to the covering of the wing. Just wanted to make sure my little hatches are going to fit. I'll do the covers for the hatches later. Just wanted to make sure before I go on to replicating this on the other side. A lot of times when you do the second one, you figure a shortcut you could have used on the first one. So it's always good to just take your time and figure out the step-by-step approach. And when you do the second one, you already know this is going to fit, this is going here, and it's kind of cut and dry, then it goes a lot faster. Next step, I want to take the little piece out and glue a piece of 1/4 inch soft stock to this. And I'll be able to drop it back in and carve it down to shape. And that'll be my little door, my access door. I just put some slow drying. See, on this side, flip it over. We got a piece right here. Nice piece of 1/4 inch. I'll just trim this off, and this will be ready to do a carving operation. Now you can see the blocks are just sticking up. I've got them bolted in. Kept a little relief cut out for the wire so the wire can exit. But what I'm going to do is just lay this nice and flat now. Get a nice, either a brand new 26 blade or a plain, and just shave this down just to the very end, and then block sand the last little bit in here. Just take little ice shavings off a little at a time. And if we calculate it out right, I'll look around here and see if there's anything else I want to add in terms of beefing up these gear blocks. You can just feel around here and see when you're getting close. We don't want to get into the ribs. Now the last little bit I'll do with a sanding block. Then what I'll do is I'll take these little blocks out and harden all the edges with thin CA. Well, we just figured that out right. The bolt heads are just coming out even with the top, as if I planned it that way. Believe me, I didn't. It just happened. Now, a lot of times I'll see how this works out. A lot of times I like to put little pieces of aluminum tubing around the screw holes. Keeps the Allen heads from getting chewing up the whole block. Another nice little detail. If you have a little bit of a sloppy fit on one side of the block, what you can do is, like I'm doing, just wedge in a piece of 64th plywood, run a few little drops of glue here, shave it off, and also I want to put a little piece in here and here. I took a little bit, see these two seams are nice, this has got too much of a gap, so I'll just fill that gap with 64th plywood. Come back, look at this, I'm doing these blocks. Karen comes back from her class. Look at this. Oh. Wow, that is beautiful. Tell you guys must have had the Go-Go Boys over there tonight.
Isn't that, they come out nice?
Fantastic, fantastic. That's going to look nice. Mike and I will put it up tomorrow.
Well, you can't put it up until you spray it. I'll show you what you have to do.
Okay. Well, let me finish these gear blocks.
I need a place to put this, Wendy.
Right on the floor. I'll put it away later. Let me finish my gear blocks and I'll come up. Looks great. That's going to look nice. And once that dries up, I put a little piece on the other side. I should be able to keep a nice couple thousandths clearance on each side, nice and equally. A Little tricks like that, little details really help you out. It really makes all little detail fittings just that much nicer. Well, we worked later than we wanted to tonight, but we got this part of the gear block work done. And time to go work. I'm going to work on Karen's little thing for a while and get some sleep. Finally. All right. Oh, I'm so glad this is up. Anyway, Karen's really having a lot of fun with her friends. Mike Kajeski gave me a hand putting this up this morning. Really adds a nice little dimension to our beautiful. All these projects around here. 100-year-old house. Here's my tip of the day. Never buy an old house. Now, I just got from John Miller a real nice package here with, this looks like the final rendition, I'm going to go over this, final rendition of the Brodak Profile Cardinal plans. And it looks like he's done one slam dunk real nice job here, really nice. Anyway, we're going to be reviewing these, looking them over. Obviously, there's some concessions to making a plane a kit, and none of them are really going to affect how the plane is going to fly. Let's see what they're going to talk about. Quality plans. Wow, all the ribs are shown in full size, so if you have a need to repair one, a crash, a real quality job. Really nice. Even shows the lettering layout. Anyway, I'm going to be looking these over tonight. Really nice. Oh boy. Now, there's another piece here. And this is the parts. Let me just show you this. So I talked to John the other night about this. The parts layout all on a separate sheet. Wing ribs, rudder, fuselage. Now that is the ultimate in quality when you have a part. Now, should you want to, or even if you want to replicate another plane, but having everything in full size, full scale, yeah, that looks like it's going to be real nice. Really nice. That's from John Miller. What a job. Beautiful. Anyway, and I hope, John, real soon, I hope as soon as we can get some kits shipped out, we have a waiting list. I know people are waiting to build this little guy, and I'm sure the phone is going to be ringing off the hook as soon as this kit gets released. Great job. And as always, I'm sure John Brodak's end of it will be just as this is bulletproof as ever. Anyway, nice set of plans. And John also sent me a little sketch. I guess this is one of his designs, his custom jobs. It looks like a nice, similar to John Sutherland's plane. The open cockpit. That looks real nice. And another design. Well, it even has the little Steve Busso kind of things where you draw your color schemes out on this. Anyway, a lot of nice samples of his artwork and his plans. I think we're going to be real happy with anything we get from John if the quality looks like this. Here's the fuselage for the twin boomer. A lot of cool stuff. That's from John Miller, and he will be part of the Cardinal program now, one way or another. He's already part of it. Anyway, thanks a lot. I'll be giving him a call tonight. Now, it's unbelievable how good this has worked out. This is one of, you can see I have it totally loaded up with the tow. This is one of the best inventions. I'm telling you, this is something I wish I would have invented. Big invention, right? Looks like a whalebone. And actually, the way I come up with this idea is what I was doing. I was using the I-beam wing to hold the tow. And if you let this tow just touch each other, it just turns into a ball of hair or something, whatever. But anyway, we're ready to load up the molds again. Nothing new here other than Jimmy reported in today that he's got our number 3 mold ready to rock and roll. So These will probably be the last couple of parts we make out of these until we get Jimmy's brand new mold. And they are just like little eggs coming out of the chicken here. Chicken's coming out of the egg.
Next step is we have to make up a control horn. Now normally this is one of the typical elevator horn. One of the things that I liked at the last Nationals, if you go back and look at the Nat tapes, Bob McDonald had a cute little gizmo. And what he did, he took two horns, cut the arm off one of the horns, and I'm sure he did it with a machine shop, with a milling machine or some very precision way, so that he could unbolt the horn, tweak the flaps, and then bolt it back through a little hole in the fuselage. Now I really like that idea, and I wanted to try to make one of those myself. I'm suggesting that if you do this, you go buy it from Bob McDonald rather than try to make it yourself. But I want to try to make it myself. I have to do this, and I have to see how it's going to work, and I want to try different settings and whatever. But if you're going to be interested in this, probably you'd want to get that from Bob McDonald anyway. So the first thing I have to do is cut up two horns. Now I'm going to cut another one up. I want to make sure I have the right spacing, of course. And then I want to get them joined together in such a way that I can drill one hole through both horns at the same time. And again, this whole thing comes about. I'm going through a cycle of seeing how I want to do this. And of course, there's always ways you can make it better, worse, lighter, cheaper, quicker. But for my purposes, this will allow me tonight, if I get to finish this tonight, to see if this is going to work out in the plane, and if it doesn't work, obviously, or if I'm not happy with it, the choice is, I can get one right from Bob McDonald that probably is already done on a milling machine, and that would have been probably the smartest thing to do, but I want to get this done right now, and I want to make sure Bob gets the credit for it. It looked like a real neat idea. I'm not trying to steal his inventions here or anything, but this is one of the things. And by the way, just a little note, Bob McDonald has a lot of cool little inventions, and this is only one of them. So I need to get another horn, I need to trim them both, and then make sure that they're the right shape in the fuselage, the right length, the right amount of horn sticking out of the fuselage for the fillet that I want to have. Now obviously I'm going to have to take the bushing out of here, and make sure I have a nice tight fit when I join that together.
Now, I was thinking about this idea for a long time, and I really think this is a real good idea. It's I've never ever liked tweaking horns in planes. I don't know, they have memory, and I've always preferred trim tails, but this looks like it could be the best, obviously the best of all worlds, especially if you have 1/8" horns to begin with. But we'll find out, and one way or another, even if this little experiment doesn't work out the way we want, at least we'll know enough to call Bob McDonald and order a horn. Anyway, want to dress this off and then drill the holes. Oh, you son of a gun.
What I need to do is obviously marry these up very, very close and drill this one so that the wire is in a complete center line. And what I'll do is I'll grip this with some vice grips, I think. Be the most realistic way of doing this. That looks like about the only way I'm going to get this drilled accurately.
Now what I did is, and again, this really should be a lot more precision than I've made it, but I'm able to go like this, and that's all I need to do because I'm going to get these bushings into the flap so that they're perfectly equal without having a bolt attached real tight, and make sure that I don't have, for instance, you wouldn't want to bolt this into the plane with the wires crooked in some dimension, so what I'll do is just make this hand tight when I install it in the plane. But this should give me, and if it needs more flap tweak than that, then forget about it. Should give me about 20 degrees in each dimension. And of course it's nice, I've heard that Bob's thing is made on a laser, but I don't know, really doesn't have to be a lot more precision than that. And of course we'll get a bolt and a blind nut and a lock washer in there.
The next thing I want to do is I want to solder that blind nut on that.
And I always recommend soldering these bushings in, even though they are pressed on a Stimson press. I'll solder that whole thing up with silver solder and I can clean it up and then run a little test to see if we've got the adjustment that I want. Now the last thing I want to do tonight, I'm not going to get a chance to install this today. I clean all the flux off with baking soda and water. Just polish it up a little bit on a buffing wheel. I want to make these little slip, I don't know what you call them, slip joints. I've never liked to use tubing on horns. Once a little CA gets in there, it locks up and you got to destroy the ring to get the horn out. I'm going to make these little straps up as I always do out of a piece of tin can stock or copper. I'll see what I have. But I ran a little test with the horn. See, I've got it a little bit out of alignment, but by loosening it up, I can pretty much go put it wherever I want. When I get it exactly where I want, I'll have a little hole in the fuselage with a little copper eyelet, and I can just put a ball wrench in it, tighten up. So Bob McDonald, looks like that was a great idea. Time will tell. But I also want to put a little fail-safe on the end of the nut here, on the end of the bolt, to put a little drop of solder or something so that this bolt can't come flying out either. That's another thing I don't want to have, that this bolt could loosen up and fall into the fuselage. Like to have it that, of course, every once in a while you could check it too. Oh, there's the phone. Just take a little bit of material off here. This obviously, there's some room for removing material here, but I always leave it as fat as I can right on the end. So I only take the material off the sides. From an engineering point of view, this is not going to weaken the horn at all. You don't take any off around the radius. Leave a ball on the end, and if you can thin this out a little bit, save a little weight. Anything you can do here just means you can pile on more of that Brodak dope. Anyway, we're going to make the little tin straps here, and that's probably going to be it for tonight. Now, the reason I like to use this material is just an old-fashioned tin can stock. Because if you get a drop of CA in there, you don't have to rip the back of the ring apart. And it seems to give you just enough clearance that you never get a bind in there either. That's the other good thing. And just an ordinary piece of a tuna can here, Tony the Tuna. Now if you happen to make it too tight, which in some cases this won't spin, what you need to do is just pinch it in this dimension. And you can infinitely vary the amount of clearance there. In fact, we could even use a little more here. Just a little through on. Once you put a tube on there and one drop of CA gets in, oh, God, is it a... First time that happened to me, I swear I'd never do that again. The last thing I did tonight, I got two little retainers, put a couple little nails in them so that they'll get a better bite. Tomorrow when I get down here, I'm going to try to install this in the fuselage, and we'll see. Being it comes apart, I may avoid having to cut a big chunk out of the back like you normally have to do to get a horn in. But anyway, one of the things we will be able to do is take it apart and put it in two pieces. Again, more on that tomorrow. It's been a long day. See you in the morning. Now this morning, the first thing I want to do, I want to get the Dremel out and put a notch in the back, exactly right on center, so I can press this horn in. And I'm going to try to see if I can just drill two small holes on each side, slide the horn in from both sides and get it in. Again, if I can't, I'll have to cut like a normal slot so I can slide the horn in. But I think I'll be able to do it by having a horn that comes apart in two sides, in two pieces. What I can do is slide each one in. First thing is to cut that slot. Double-sized saw blade is usually good for making this kind of a cut on a real low speed. And boy, this is the one dangerous tool you don't want to catch your finger in. right off the center line. And I should be able to just drill 2 holes in here again. We'll find out if we can then thread the horn in without having to elongate that hole in any way. Now, whenever you want to drill a hole through plywood, it's better to drill, or balsa wood, better to drill with a cutter like this, because what happens with a drill, you can't, all of a sudden it goes through and knocks things out of the way. These just put a real nice hole in. So you wouldn't be able to do this with a one-piece horn. I poked a little hole right through the balsa with a ball end driver. Don't even need a drill. I can just set the horn up at 0, 0 now, so both flaps are equal. Bond a thick CA around here, and then what I wanted to do is test that I don't have any little craziness, any little out of alignments here or anything. I want to wrap this whole post with some carbon fiber tow to stiffen this up. Reinforce the control system with some of this. This is a pretty heavy duty roll of carbon fiber tow. Now what I do, the easiest way to start a job like this, just tack glue one end on. Now I can start wrapping and wrapping and wrapping until I wind that whole spool on both sides. Now that'll give us a real stiff. See, what I'm counting on is that the horn wires will never go out of alignment when I loosen this screw. Since they're in alignment now, I really want to make sure. Now it would be nice if you had a little way of machining a notch in here or something so it could pivot on the center of the wire, but I think this will do since we're using this as a tube right now. Of course, next thing is I'll wrap the other side, soak it with thin CA, and then put a smooth finish on it. Now I just get a couple of coats of CA and sand each one and make them like a little, I don't know, a little coating on this. I want this to be really rigid because this in effect holds the 2 wires in alignment. It also acts as a fuselage former, so it serves quite a few purposes. And of course we want to get any extra material off of it. By the way, this is a good idea. These nail files bend, and they really are handy for getting in this kind of a location. And we're going to pick this up tonight when we get back from work. Right now I got about a good 2-hour session in this morning, and I can get a 2-hour session in tonight. I'll really be in good shape. I want to hook the push rod up next, and I could be thinking about any other little idiosyncrasy thing that I want to do tonight during the day, since we're going to be cutting some tree branches down. It's going to be a lot of fun. We had some storm damage, and I'm looking forward to getting them all put away with the chipper. Okay, been connecting this and then setting up our little eyelet, and we'll work on that tonight when we get back. Now, I had a list of stuff I wanted to do here. First thing I wanted to do is I want to be able to get in with the wrench, because now that those 2 horn arms are in alignment, and I want to make sure I can do my tweaking back and forth, which looks like it's going exactly the way we planned, like very few other things. I want to make sure I put them both back at neutral, just for the construction of the plane. And I'll put a little brass eyelet in there to keep the 440 wrench from chewing up that hole and making it bigger. Now, of course, the first thing I want to check, make sure that I have that side, and I can get them both back to neutral. Insert that little brass eyelet, but first I need to trim it about half length. And then I want to line it up using an Allen wrench to actually do the alignment while the glue joint dries. So I know when I use this eyelet, it will guide me right into that screw when the flaps are in neutral. Now that little eyelet really should protect this, and I can see this is going to be, you're going to have to be really careful when you get in there. And again, another nice little detail that should, hopefully, give us every advantage on trim. Now that, exactly what I want to have is that little eyelet lines me right up with the Allen screw. Alright, the next step is I want to make the little end on a push rod and get the controls equalized. First step is with the arrow shaft, then get an 093 hole drilled right through it and make sure it's a tight fit. Using this system, remember, this is our reference flap. This one will be the one that when the bell crank is in neutral. By the way, it's real handy that we can get the bell crank right in neutral here. And we can get the flap point in neutral, and we can measure up the length of the rod. But we don't reference off the outside flap. Even though I put that in neutral, it's just for lining up the plane. We'll always have this flap as being the neutral flap to the elevators, and this one will always be our trim flap. Really important to get a press fit on this wire, a nice tight fit. This is what makes this, that you don't have even a little bit of slop in there, and that's going to turn the vibration. Phone call, President Nixon calling the Spitfire company. Now what I do, I make the hole that this is ultimately going to go in the arrow shaft a little elongated so I can line this up to neutral and then pin it with some thin CA and wrap this with carbon fiber. Okay, now I can do a little bit of get the bell crank right in neutral, make sure the horn is in neutral, and I can get a rough idea where I'm going to have to drill this little hole to get the alignment real close. Now what I'm going to do is make this hole a little bit larger than it has to be so I can get a fine tuning on this before I set that last part in. The best cutters for going right through an arrow shaft to get a nice hole and then elongate it just a little bit so we can have a fine tuning before we actually, I want the same, obviously equal up and down, and I'm referencing off the inside flap. That's the one that will always be hard mounted to the control system. Now, because you have a little bit of ability to fine tune, and by the way, one of the things I'm going to be doing is making an adjustable tail horn, so I'm reversing the push rods at the flap horn so I have even more adjustment. But I can vary this. Now it looks like if you look down here that I have a little bit more down in the flap than up. And what I do then, just look at the hole here where the push rod is. Let's see if we can focus in on this. And I can grind a little bit more forward to this, just to elongate the hole. By the way, this also lets this ride in the bushing nice and tight, rather than having a little bit of drag or whatever you want to call friction. This lets this rod rotate until it's right centered on the bushing. Okay, so I'm going to take a little bit more off of this, and that should give us a really, really equal. Of course, this gives you an infinite adjustment before you lock it in. Okay, now it looks like I have a little bit more in the opposite direction. I can just make a little fine adjustment, and when I think I have it, just put 1 drop of CA on there. Remember, I'm referencing off the inside flap only. That looks real close. Well, what I'll do is just pin this down with 1 drop of CA. Let that kick. Check that the belt crank's in dead neutral. So a lot easier to do than when it's buried inside a wing and you have to look through with a periscope. I'm using a full throw of the belt crank. I don't want to use half of the throw. Now I want to wrap this the same way as I wrap the trailing edge. From this point to the end, wrap it with carbon fiber, reinforce the end of it. The way to wrap this is just tack glue with CA just one side on, let it kick, and then I can wrap it around.
Now I'm always going to little notches in here. I'm going to put an eyelet or a washer and then wrap some copper wire on here for a redundant system.
And then stay bright silver solder and deflux with baking soda and water. And that control system should be pretty well set, and we can move on to the next step of construction.
Now I got the piece of eyelet on there, some copper wire in the grooves, and this is ready to silver solder.
Nothing but stay bright silver solder. That is really a good reason for using stay bright here. You don't want to melt the bushing that's already soldered in the horn. Remember, the flux is sulfuric acid, and what you don't want to do is forget to take and wipe it with baking soda and water. Not a great idea to be breathing the fumes in unlimited quantities either. No binding at all. And get your old baking soda and water out, and that neutralizes the acid. Do you think we could afford a new flux brush here pretty soon? Always let the joint cool naturally, and just, it kills the acid. Now I won't lubricate this yet with the chain lube, because what I want to do is get the top push rod in. I don't want that grease on there when I'm trying to get a soldering joint. You can always generally tell a good solder joint if it's shiny. Shiny usually tells you it's going to be a reasonable joint. You want to check it doesn't bind on either end. That's about as smooth and free a control system as I've ever made. And we have that option of adjusting the outer flap. So maybe this is something we'll want to incorporate in all the planes, but obviously we'll know at the end of this whole session, at the end of this whole year, at the end of our life. Anyway, glad that's over with. On to the next step. Next step, and I got a little bit of time left tonight, I'm just going to putter around here. I want to radius all the edges of all the ribs with a fine nail file. Nail file, by the way, this is a Bud McKnight sanding stick. Nail files really have been a helpful, really nice for doing this kind of trim work. And any edge, even these edges, they get right in the corner. And even if I have time, we'll see how this night's going to go. Get a coat of dope on the ribs. I have this idea in my mind. I want to try putting Rodak primer on the rib caps. And we're going to have to see. Anyway, it's one of the thoughts I've had. But you want every edge that's going to be an open bay. You want to for sure have a radius on it. Then we want to get the dope on here, maybe 4 or 5 coats of dope all around the perimeter. and then redo the edges, retouch up every edge so that every edge has nothing but smooth spots. And this is going to be, you won't really see this on a tape, but this is really just time consuming. Actually though, this is one of the parts of the thing that's kind of relaxing, is this really isn't like doing some of the other things where you get filthy dirty. But this is where it really starts to get to be now, the extra little time that's involved. And you pay a day of sanding right now, boy oh boy. Later on you save 20 hours of little spots where the tissue wants to go through. And these suckers all want to be radiused. Every edge wants to be radiused. And the smooth sticks are just about right. I would guess if you didn't have sticks, you'd want to be using, 320 or something. And you want to, another really great trick is you never want to do this by looking at it. You almost should do this in the dark. You want to do it by feels. I can feel there's little rough spots in the grain. Usually they'll be right up on the front of the rib because the grain is changing. It just takes time, and if you can get the patience to do this, boy, when that I-beam ring is all done, it's like a diamond. Last thing, I got some sticky back sandpaper. And what I'm doing, I'm going down by each rib. Then I'm going to put some little braces, some uprights back here. These, when you press down on, they really are. I realize what I'm trying to do here is push the envelope, push the limit, whatever, and I think I've gone a little too far with the ribs as far as thinning them out. But I can just go back and put a little brace in there. Maybe that'll stiffen it up. It certainly isn't going to add more than about a grain or two to the plane. Sticky back sandpaper is nice for doing the ribs. And since I'm going to be doing the ribs after I put the primer on, after the second coat of primer, getting these ribs real nice is a very labor intensive, but boy, once it's done, the thing is too, there's not to look at. Just run your hand down each rib. You'll feel any little imperfect. There's one right here. You can feel every little imperfection, just the slightest little bit. Because first you want to get them all trued up with the block. And you use your fingers to get the final. When you see an I-beamer sparkling in the sun, especially this one's going to have a million rivets and a million I don't know what's. I just found another. There's a real hard spot where some CA ran out onto the wood. Now anybody that's ever built an I-beam plane, and believe me, my I-beams go back to the published one of '67. That's a long time to be publishing I-beam planes. But one of the things is when a wing is in this state, it's really not that strong until you get that covering on. And as that covering shrinks, and this is why I really want to try, get all the ribs as perfect as they can be, because this is going to be our first real full finish for Brodak dope. And I want to really see how far I can push this as far as getting every rib just perfect on this. So when that sun hits it, I don't want Buzz Brodak coming out and giving me a spanking out at the field. This plane has to really be as good as I can make it. I started putting some of these braces in when, guess what happened? What always happens in the middle of trying to get something done around here? Oh, where do you see this? Wait. I heard noise upstairs. I heard little squirrels Little Brodak Cardinals. I heard noise up here, Karen.
Oh, he's here.
He's here.
He's here.
He's here. Look what's here. Oh, look what's here. The Brodak doll. Let's get him out of the box. Look, she loves her Brodak doll. Oh my God.
Don't your way, honey. You have to help me.
All right. Looks like he's in a coffin. Yeah. Look, and this is the greatest thing. Anybody sends me stuff with packing peanuts, these things wind up all over the neighbor's lawn.
Come on, you have to
Come
help
on,
me.
take them out.
My nails are still wet.
Oh my God. This, by the way, this doll was made in Carmichael, PA by, I don't know, what's the name?
Donna's
Dollhouse. Yeah, I know. His head's coming off.
Put the camera down for a minute.
Now, we're going to raffle this doll off at Brodak's contest.
Gotcha.
First Brodak, he's going to, oh, look at this.
Look at him.
You can tell, look at this.
Is he beautiful?
Mr. Carmichael, PA, look at this.
Look at him.
Oh my God.
And now he has his choice of women.
His choice of women. How come I don't have my choice of women?
You're an old fart.
Oh!
He's a handsome young
No
man.
wonder I'm not getting that Spitfire built. Look at him. What are you going to name him? What's his name?
Eliza.
Hey, watch where their hands going.
He's Eliza.
No, my babies. Wow, I'm telling you.
Wonderful or what?
I'm telling you. Now, if we only had an I-beam Spitfire, oh my God, watch, he's going to fall over. Anyway, do you love him or
I
what?
love him. He's gorgeous.
All right.
He's just gorgeous. Right, let's do
Now listen, guys, make sure every one of these dolls comes to Brodak's contest.
Yeah, let's see how he is with Frances here.
Frances is too fat.
She's
Frances is chubby.
Yeah, her face is too big. Okay, he goes to Eliza. He goes with Eliza.
All right, leave him with Eliza. I'm telling you.
Oh, Frances.
I need to get the Spitfire done. You're holding up production here. These dolls are costing me all my Spitfire time. This is terrible.
Eliza's a beautiful young man.
And the man in black. He really does look cool.
He looks like a Victorian male.
Those we really do love the dolls, but I'm telling you, I got to get this finished. I'm going to try to finish this up before I quit for the night. Karen's home. The dolls are attacking me. Now, any of the ribs that look well, I don't know. See, these ribs are a little bit longer. There's a couple of them made out of some really soft wood, so this really stiffens them up quite a bit. Those little braces really did stiffen it up quite a bit. Well, we'll come back and work on it tomorrow. We're coming up on the end of this tape, and we got 5-10 minutes more. And I really have been spending an awful lot of time getting the ribs trued up on a separate tape. Of course, we do more than one tape at a time here, so sometimes things get overlapped. One of the things we did is we replaced the lead outs with bigger diameter 0.45 lead outs, and we did a lot of sanding. I spent a couple of nights just grinding out the ribs nice and smooth. I'm waiting. I'm a day or two away from having the actual dope that we're going to use on this. It's going to come from John Brodak, and we're going to do a separate dedicated tape on covering the plane and prepping it for the covering job. And that'll be part of a series for John that we hope is going to help a lot of people get that front row finish that they want. Now, it's funny, we spend a lot of time, and I just watch these flights. I don't even watch them. I listen to the motor over and over and over and over again. And it is really a lot of fun. Having a TV in your workshop, having a VCR in your workshop, even an old junky one. In fact, there were some exciting flights on this tape that was, every time I look at them, I laugh. George wants to know why we can't fly 7.0 black times. Here's a good example of the air at the field. Here you go up, you get above the trees, and the third loop the plane just goes all crazy to hell on you. Look at that. Anyway, but that's just one of the tinkering things. The new bell crank is in here, the new lead outs, I should say. We've got them pegged right into position. Again, a little ironic that we're sitting here today watching Strega flying, and Strega is no longer with us, needless to say. It's going to be a subject of a repair video that I'll do probably in the near future, start on it little by little. Anytime you lose a good plane is a friend. A plane is like Bert and Ernie, like a friend, like a fish. You always miss it. And it's funny, here it is on the floor. Half of it is in a paper bag. Here, a Roy Rogers lunch bag has the rest of the ribs. And it's still flying over there, thanks to the magic of video. I just hate to think what the world would be like if we didn't have some of this stuff on video. I'd never be able to go back to, I don't know, the times that I enjoy the most. Since the Nats till now, this has just been a real enjoyable time working with this. Working with Strega, working with the Jet. We're trying to lay out our tune pipe stuff, trying to get all our bits and pieces in order. And it has been, and will be, it always is, an exciting season. We are working on about 7 projects here that all show some promise. The biggest thing we're looking forward to is the dope, because I really feel like this Brodak dope is going to be, it's going to be a whole new world of finishing for us. A lot easier, a lot more predictable, a lot more buffable with everybody that really wants to have a nice finish will have that information and the quality materials to do a really, really nice finish. And that to me is the essence of model aviation, is the finishing, the detailing, getting everything as really nice, pleasant, smooth, whatever you want to define it as. I want to end the tape with a great story. Not a modeling story, but I really feel this is the kind of story you can really relate to. I have a neighbor on this block. Cranky, old, the kind of person that complains about everything. And from time to time she's complained about me spraying in the backyard, spraying after dark outside. She's really been kind of a pain in the ass, in fact. And recently the kids on the block have started, and we live on a block with a high school, they've started going up and down a block, peeling wheels. I got everybody that's been a teenager knows about that. Anyway, she's been down at police station 10, 15 times. She's got the police staking out the school, sitting on my front lawn, staking out the house, staking out everything, putting radar guns up behind my bushes and stuff. And guess what happens? The cops are out there today. And the first thing that happens is the first person they caught was hard speeding. 45 and a 25. Oh, man. Oh, life is so cruel. Anyway, hey, share the tapes. Join us in the shop, and we'll see you on the next video. And I don't even know. So many projects. Feel like a man with too many girlfriends. You're probably thinking, too many girlfriends. What does Karen have to say about that? I don't know, but I know she doesn't go for that stuff. Anyway, she's happy that I'm down in the cellar here till 2 in the morning every night. Keeps me out of trouble, keeps me from losing all my hair. Hey, and I hope it does the same for you. Modeling is a wonderful, wonderful thing to do with your life. I often wonder late at night like this, I often wonder what my life would have been like had I never met Harold Price, had I never gotten involved in model aviation and a wonderful family of people of modeling. I wonder what it's hard to believe, I don't know. It's a question I guess everybody can ask. You can ask it out loud. Ask your wife what you think you would have done if you had not been a world-class model like you are. I wonder where my fish would have been if I never brought them. Hey, and speaking of fish, look how small they are here. Look at those fish are tuna fish right now. Amazing. Man, it's already, we're ready for the building season full time here, but we really haven't given up on the idea. We'll get a couple more days of flying, but I wouldn't hold my breath. And boy, if there ever is anything to dream about before you go to bed at night, dream about Spitfires. Oh, geez, dream about the endless possibilities. Maybe if I wasn't a model, I would have been a fish or something, a tuna fish, I don't know. But anyway, I really hope you're sharing these videos with people and enjoying them, having a great time.
Learn to laugh at yourself a little bit, learn to laugh at me a little bit. Share the good times. Share the times we have fun in the shop eating pizza and the times that we have to repair Strager. Hey, if you live by the Strager, you die by the Strager. Anyway, and we will see you on the next tape. Can't wait to cover that Spitfire.
Really think about it. What would you be if you were on a Spitfire? I don't know. What would you be? Just hard to imagine a life without modeling.
Hey, thanks for joining us. See you on the next tape. Let's go hang a chandelier, or I don't know, Karen's got plans within plans for me here. I can hear it coming. See you on the next tape.